But to kick us off on the hour at 1500, we've got a keynote session from the amazing Patrick Martin from Google Firebase. Hello, Patrick. Welcome to Pocket Gamer Connect's Digital 5. I'm really excited to have you as part of our developer toolkit sponsored by Denuvo Biodetto.
Am I there? Can you
yes,
hear me?
We had a few problems with your audio, but we found you now, so that's really great. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
So fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to let you loose on our amazing audience today. And don't forget, guys, if you want to ask Patrick a question, you can do so in our Q&A chat box down below, or even just give him some love in the chat area below also, or talk to him on Discord. Over to you, Patrick.
All right. Awesome. Thanks. So let's see. All right, here we go. Hi, everybody. Obviously, you just heard, my name is Patrick Martin, and I'm a developer relations engineer with Google's Firebase. This is a sponsored session, so I'll be focusing kind of on what Firebase can do for you, but I'm really used to playing the, can I avoid the sponsored session game at conferences like this? So I'm going to try to keep this interesting. And to be honest, like the entire week has been filled with like people telling you what you need to do. So hopefully I can fill you in on like how to do it. I'll be glad to answer any questions afterwards. Obviously, I am in the Discord channel. Just look for like the little fire emoji after my name, Patrick. I'm also at Puxor on the Twitter, complete with a silent 3 at the end because I thought that was really cool 15 years ago, and now I have to live with it. But you can obviously always tweet at me, but a good number of Firebase folks are actually chilling in the Discord, including engineers on the Games SDK team. And there are a bunch of Crashlytics folks hoping to talk to game developers about like, what you need. So definitely chime in there and ask around or check out our page on Meet to Match. So to start, what is Firebase? So Firebase's mission is to help game developers build and operate successful games that delight players. And I will say that the official mission says app developers and delight users, but us games folks have tweaked this a little bit, and we really take this to heart. Which is why we're here. And to tie this into my talk a little better, there are things Google's pretty good at, generally building, scalable cloud services and machine learning things. And that's actually kind of different than what a lot of game developers need to know to like make great games. So our entire goal is to just bridge the gap between, Google's skill sets and your own. And Firebase, I will say, is already used by millions of developers all over the world. And it's being battle tested at scale with folks who probably are at this conference today. So I guess don't just take my word for it. And to make it really easy to use, Firebase has a number of client SDKs designed to meet app and game developers where they're most comfortable. So if you're just a straight up app developer, this means Android, iOS, and web SDKs. But for games folks like myself, there are C++ and Unity SDKs, which not only are they built on top of the Android and iOS SDKs, so there's no feature gap there, but there's partial support for Windows, Mac, and Linux. I will say this is currently labeled as beta. It's intended for use in the Unity editor, or if you don't use Unity, if you do local builds in your game engine, because sometimes a device build takes a long time. But since it does work, I would love to see more people using it and giving us feedback. So I do have 20 minutes to talk about 20 products, which is why I'm kind of going fast, but I also won't get to them all. So at a high level, Firebase has 3 major pillars. There's Build, which helps you experiment faster and then scale reliably. Release and Monitor, which makes sure that your game is stable and that folks can play it. And then our Engage pillar, which lets you use your existing players to increase the value of your game, what they really want from you. So Build is mostly where I lived before I joined Firebase. So I really like relating a little bit from my past when I set up these talks. So I will say that my first game on the iOS App Store was a one-time purchase for $10. It did manage to shoot to like the #1 spot in the RPG category, but being a complete single-player offline adventure, it probably wouldn't make it that well in today's market. And I will say that looking at the numbers for RPGs versus every other game genre, yesterday's market probably was a tough sell too. There were pretty limited roads for growth. The game could not get patched over the air. It was actually mostly written in a custom engine in C with some C++ sprinkled in, which they're not the same language, and we chose the hard one. Making calls to the web at the time required hand twiddling bits and a 512 character static buffer, which I know there are non-engineers listening to me today. So just imagine the biggest headache you've ever had. Then imagine having that like every time you had to connect to the internet. That was more or less my life back then. We couldn't message players in game. Updating the game without spinning up an app store release wasn't possible. And our community consisted mostly of mobile gaming message boards. We didn't have a location of our own. And in fact, I was listed as the resident rock star on our Wikipedia page, so we didn't really even manage that very well. But of course, when I finally made a connected game, my SQLite 3 experience did not scale super well to the cloud. I tagged a lot of players as cheaters for no apparent reason. Player progress would like sync to the wrong database shard. Pretty much everything you'd expect a C++ dev like mistake to make is what I did. So this is where I really like to highlight some of Firebase's build tools. They are backend as a service kind of things, as a term that a lot of folks like to use. And to show you how this might be different, I'll highlight a game called Lotteria. This was actually a Google Doodle living on Google's homepage. So if you're ever worried about Firebase scaling, this scaled literally overnight to like homepage levels of traffic. And specifically, I'm going to walk you through the find a game flow, but every part of Lotteria is enabled by a real-time database. There is a complete write-up here, so you can, like, the technical folks can read through this at their leisure and scan this QR code, of course, to go there faster. But if you haven't heard of the game Lotteria before, it's a lot like bingo. You see if this card on the right matches one of the cards on your board. If it does, you place a token down. And if you get 4 tokens in a row, you scream Lotteria and win. So it uses a simple matchmaking system to get a game started. First, a player will click find a game, and they'll create a real-time database node with their player ID right here. And eventually, they're expecting a game ID to get populated right here in this box. And the player also adds another node to a looking for game queue, which at this point, I should stop, take a step back, and give you a brief overview of real-time database. This is a NoSQL database that's optimized for speed. You won't want to use this for something like storing a player position in like a first-person shooter, but it's great for the asynchronous multiplayer experiences that I see on a lot of mobile games these days. And it's great for Lotteria, where you have very few state changes, like a new card happens every few seconds. Someone screams Lotteria once in a game, but when the states do change, everyone needs to see it quickly. You need to like resolve it without any conflict. So back to Lotteria's system. A player joined a game, they're placed in a queue. Then Lotteria looks for groups of players, and if there are enough to start a game, it adds a game to the games node. And each player is then assigned the game ID to play in. Listeners in each game client know to change the game state when this gets populated, and then can just play the game to their heart's content. But when I say that Lotteria listens for a player moving into a game, what I mean is that a cloud function trigger is fired when the looking for game queue updates. Then code runs on trusted servers in Google's cloud, which scale horizontally with demand. So as your game gets popular, since I used a trigger, it happens in the background. So clients don't have to worry about, disconnecting whilst the find for game function is running. Or if you hit a cold start with like really simple netcode, you won't lock up while you're waiting for like a function to return. It's just all happening in the cloud without your knowledge. And when it's time to enter a game, it's just a call from real-time database. It's nothing you have to do with like, curl or anything. And since much of this logic is written using the real-time database SDK, this means that users are manually inserting themselves into, the game queue and stuff. So you may be wondering, what stops another player from kicking you out of the queue or jumping in line or even just hijacking your whole game? The answer is Firebase Authentication. Lotteria uses something called anonymous sign-in, which grants a unique instance-specific ID to each client that joins the game. And then this enables things like security rules in real-time database to lock players to only being able to access things that you want them to access. And I will note that this slide says you can implement it in under 10 lines of code. If you're a Unity developer and only using anonymous sign-in, depending on your preference with curly braces, this can be as few as 3 lines of code, or 1 if you're evil. Now, anonymous sign-in lets you create a player account without any friction, but if your game is more permanent than a Google Doodle, you are going to want to persist this user account in some way. So we offer integration for a whole ton of different sign-in providers. A common flow you'll see a lot of games and even apps do is that you start the game as a guest with no friction. And then once the player sees the value of your game and they want to continue it, you can migrate them to a more permanent account, maybe using Google Single Sign-On or Game Center. And I'll say that there are hooks for all these providers, but we don't actually favor any of them. In fact, the Google SDK is a separate download and integration. So, we're not forcing you to choose Google. You can really choose any of these. We have custom hooks in case you don't want to use this. We see a lot of games publishers want to have a user account for all of their games, so they can just implement that ID as a custom hook. And again, I won't cover all of this. Scan this code to look more, or to find out more, but even if you prefer to have more control over your infrastructure, a Firebase project is actually a Google Cloud project on the back end. So if you're like backend engineers are a little nervous seeing like kind of the bumper lanes we put up, they can always dive into the backend, tweak things to their heart content, or even migrate onto different infrastructure as your game gets big, if that ever becomes an issue, which hopefully it won't, but you always have that escape ramp. And there's a whole ton to cover. Like cloud storage is great for storing large binary files. Firestore is another database that we're pushing a lot now that scales better than real-time database, but slightly slower. It's still good for a lot of the same use cases. But Firebase is way more than just a database. And if some of you non-developers have tuned out and gone over to the Discord, this is a great time to come back, because I want to highlight some of the release and monitor products we have. So even if you're not using any build tools, these kind of help you get a good night's rest before you hit the launch button. On most of my games, release day is kind of the same. I hit submit, celebrate, and then I just hit refresh on all the app stores as the game slowly propagates out. And then I'm just stuck obsessively checking user reviews, ratings, and refreshing all the message boards I like. And sometimes it's great. I've written games to the top of the App Store charts, but other times it's complete devastation. Like I tanked a game's rating overnight from 5 stars to 1 star. And that's the worst. I basically couldn't sleep, crunched for the entire week. And it was not only a terrible experience for me, but also my dedicated players. So I want to know 2 things before I hit go. Is the game stable? And is the game fun? For stability, the first thing to do is add Crashlytics to your game. It just sits there in the background and waits for anything bad to happen, usually crashes. It's a free service and usually works automatically. If your game experiences an error, a call stack is automatically uploaded with any other relevant data, so you can gauge how stable your game is, which devices crash, and how and where they crash. And you can also append your own data to this if there's something that's unique to your game that you want to measure. The goal here is to holistically determine if your game is stable, but if you do have an issue, you'll know how widespread it is and what's failing. So you know whether it's all hands on deck crunched through the weekend, or that cosmic ray you're allowed to claim once in a career. I've already claimed that, so I'm not allowed to say that's a problem anymore. The thing with Crashlytics, though, is that you do have to run it on a device. If your game isn't out yet, you're only testing against phones you have in-house. And I think a story I like to tell a lot is that we were getting user reviews that players in one of my games were booting to a blank screen. We went and bought the phone that players were complaining about, and we couldn't replicate it on our end. It turned out that the manufacturer shipped the same name of phone with different chipsets in different regions. So where we were testing against the US variant with the US graphics card, they were seeing like the European variant with the European graphics card, and we just couldn't repro the issue. And this is obviously worst case scenario. Players will start to think you're accusing them of like lying or something. So this is where Test Lab comes in. Your options here are to either upload an APK and let like an automated robot try to play through your game. This is actually behind the Play pre-launch report, or you can configure a game loop that lets you run a predefined loop through your game on both real and virtual devices. And we've sourced these from all over the world and in all matter of performance categories. When a test completes, you get a detailed report with a video playthrough. Since most game-breaking bugs are not crashes, my blank screen was not a crash, you get a video with performance statistics overlaid. This also means that if you're testing out a new particle effect, and if you want to see if it like ruins the experience on a low-end phone, you can just upload it to Test Lab, run, and then like scrub through to where the particle effect is and see what your frame rate is. And of course, you'll eventually want to get players in on the action, which is where Firebase App Distribution comes in. This is a service that lets you upload an IPA or APK that you can then share either internally with your team or externally with testers. It does a lot of the things you'd expect, like creating testing groups, which I once sent a producer a version of the game with like a hand-drawn loading bar. Test groups kind of help you avoid that. And it manages invite links for you. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that both App Distro and Test Lab can be fully automated. I tend to drag and drop things because I'm mostly doing prototypey stuff or DevRel work. But you could have like a pre-commit hook before you merge into your mainline branch that verifies that everything works. Or if that's too much, you could have like when your nightly build goes off, you could automatically upload it for your testers and run a check to send an angry email if somebody broke the build. And stability isn't the whole thing. You want to know if your game is fun. What I like to call opening a dialogue with your players, or what Firebase calls the engage pillar. I like mine better, but I guess engage is catchier. You want to engage as many of your players as you can, because you know that 5-star to 1-star update I mentioned in-house, nobody minded, even testers we brought in. But the moment our game update hit the public internet, everybody just got angry at us. It was like the worst. So a great thing to do first is add some sort of analytics. From Firebase, this means Google Analytics. You'll get metrics like your retention cohorts right out of the box. And I'd recommend doing this from the moment you have a prototype. You know, if my coworkers are still playing my like kind of like funky prototype with my, you know, awesome programmer art, right? It means that I found my winning design. But Google Analytics is also working hard to improve the experience for game developers. So you can log any events you want, even make up your own. But there are a handful of events that, when you use them, automatically start populating a games dashboard on the Google Analytics console. And then you want to test your changes with your player base, which is what A/B testing is for. In the Firebase ecosystem, anything you can measure with an analytics event, you can measure with an A/B test. And using something like remote config, you can deploy changes to your live game without waiting for App Store updates, even if you're using Unity or C++. Anything you can parameterize in your game, you can A/B test. Like if you want to see if players like your game with 5 lives or 10 lives, you can run an A/B test against 10% of your player base, measuring maybe like session time or 7-day retention, and just see which wins out. If you have 2 different menu flows, this is a great place to test that too. But don't stop at gameplay. Like I said, my first game was a one-time purchase, but that's not the popular business model these days. Now you often want to ship a game for free and give the players an option to like spend money after they've gotten a feel for what your game's like and they want to commit. So something you can do with analytics is measure how often folks spend money and on what. But with Firebase, you can enable predictions, which, given a sufficiently sized player base, allows you to predict whether a player will trigger any given event based on their history so far. For instance, if a player exhibits a play pattern in the first week that looks like a player who would spend money in game, you might rearrange your store so you have fewer incentivized ads and more spend a dollar to earn currency kind of transactions. So you basically get Google's AI chops for free without worrying about things like training models at all. Although there is a way to manage your AI models with Firebase if that is your thing. But I want to hammer home that this isn't all of Firebase. You can build connected features a game needs today, ensure your game is stable, measure how your players like it, test changes, engage your players, even invite new players to your game with links that persist across game install. So play a game of tic-tac-toe, install the game, and then you're playing in the game you're invited to, with the goal of getting all the heavy lifting on the back end out of the way so you can focus on what probably matters most, just finding the fun. And that's it. I went really fast. I think I'm in time.
Wow, you went really fast. Thank you for that awesome presentation, Patrick.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Oh,
As
thanks.
you can probably imagine, with such a cool presentation as that was, got millions of questions.
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's get started. The first question that we've got is, I want to have one player invite another player and reward both of them with coins or game currency. How easy is this for a game developer using Unity for iOS and Android Store?
So if you want to reward both of them, I think, well, the product you'd use from Firebase is called Firebase Dynamic Links. This is what I hinted at the end that lets you invite a player into your game with an invite link that persists across the game install. I believe you get a event or a callback when that happens. You can embed your own data. So that your flow might be like embed the player ID in the invite link for the person who invited you. When the game launches with this invite link, pull the other player ID out and reward both users in like Realtime database or Firestore or something.
Cool, thank you.
So yeah, it should be pretty straightforward, I guess, is the long way of answering. Sorry, I'm an engineer.
You make it sound so easy, of course, because you are an engineer. Is Firebase okay to use for attribution for UA on Google Ads for an Android game? The questioner says, I have heard it is not very reliable and accurate compared to regular MMPs. Are there any big companies Firebase for attribution?
I mean,
that use them, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't know offhand which companies use it. This would be a great thing to follow up with me later or to ask in the Discord. I'm sure I can.
I was going to ask, can we find you in the Discord? Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
and look for me. I put a little fire emoji after my name, so it's easy. It's the pop of color in the username list. Sweet. I'm kind of embarrassed.
No, don't be. You're amazing. So go over to Discord and ask Patrick that question directly, and he'll pull that information out for you. Seek him out. Here's another question.
You are supposed to be able to get like an event from it, but I don't know the reliability. So this is a great thing to follow up with, right? So.
I heard that Facebook Google login can enable tracking in absence of IDFA. So is it allowed to ask player to log into both Facebook and Google through Firebase Auth SDK?
I mean, when it comes to IDFA, I don't quite know. And I will say anything privacy related, probably best to talk to an actual lawyer and not me. I do know that we have guides on like working with IDFA on our page, so I will recommend you look at those. And again, see me after. I'm sorry, like I should have had like a slide with links or something, but I can certainly help route you to the right place. No,
it's fine. You've got all the predictive stuff in place at Firebase, but you haven't got the predictive answers. We've really got to work on your engineering here. That's human engineering.
Believe it or not, I'm not. Believe it or not, I'm not a AI person.
Okay. You probably can't say it out loud, but cough if that was Samsung causing problems with their different phone builds for different regions under the same name. Somebody has commented.
Wait, what was the question again?
They said you probably can't say out loud, but please cough if that was Samsung causing problems with their different phone builds for different regions under the same name. You mentioned something earlier about chipsets, I think. And,
I'm sure other. I'll avoid any kind of signaling.
Good
it sounds like somebody ran into the same problem I did, and specifically with Text Mesh Pro font compilation back in the day. It's better now.
I've got a question that I'm going to leave right to the end because it's just a really nosy question. But the next question that I've got that really is about like Google Firebase is, can Firebase Test Lab work with bullet point 1, APK of a game developed in Unity? We've kind of already had that question. And the second bullet point is IPA of a game developed in Unity.
All right, so this is the Crashlytics folks want to talk to any game devs they can, so certainly reach out to them and I can help her out. But the answer to both is yes. There is not currently a SDK to like kind of smooth over the rough edges of Test Lab. But as long as you can handle a custom intent on Android or a custom URL scheme on iOS, game loops will work just fine. As far as kind of the feature parity, disparity, whatever, I believe that Robotest only work with APKs right now, but will work with Unity specifically. think the big thing that throws some game engines off is sometimes it sees an edit text off screen and thinks it's an app instead of a game, but Unity doesn't have that issue. As far as game loops themselves, they work on both iOS and Android. And yeah, again, they work on real and physical or real devices. Unity itself doesn't emit x86 builds for Android, so you can't test like on the virtual devices, which is a little unfortunate. You don't get to play as much with screen resolutions and stuff, but there's plenty of like actual hardware in the Test Lab cloud for you to use.
I've got a question about the relationship or the differences maybe together between Realtime and Cloud Firestore. Would you say that Realtime is better to use than Firestore for games, or the other way around? What's your personal preference?
So we have an entire page on choosing one database over the other. The biggest thing for Firestore is that it is currently still beta for the games SDKs, so C++ and Unity, which means that we more or less have confidence that you can actually ship a game with it now, but there are still some bugs that are open in our GitHub issue tracker and whatnot. Other than that, the thing with Firestore is it supports way more concurrent connections. I'm going off the top of my head, so definitely hold me to task and double check in our like doc pages. But I believe Firestore is around 1 million active users it can handle, or active connections. Whereas real-time database is something like 100,000 or 200,000, something in that range. So with real-time database, for a lot of games, you will have to handle sharding on your own, and but it will be faster, as like slightly better performance characteristics. So again, there's an entire page where you can like weigh the pros and cons and like even click buttons. I want to do this, I want to do that, and I'll try to make a best guess. But generally, they're both pretty good. And they're both like Firestore being slower, like maybe you're waiting 1.5 seconds instead of half a second, right? But it's still really fast.
Thank you so much for your talk today. We've got a lot of love in the room for you as well. And there's a Crashlytics engineer that wants anybody to message Sam on Discord with any questions also. He's under the name Sam E Firebase Crashlytics. So he wants everybody to know that. I've got a question for you though, Patrick. As part of Pocket Gamer Connect's Digital 5 all this week, we've been doing a variety of different bits and pieces. And one of the things that we've been doing is Careers Week. You know, engineers get a lot of stick, and database engineers, especially DBAs, do get a heck of a lot of bad press because it sounds like the job's boring, blah, blah, blah. You're one of the most exciting engineers I've ever spoken to. I just want to know, like, for the purpose of people that are attending maybe our Careers Week, on a scale of like 1 to like a gajillion, how much do you love your job?
I mean, I absolutely love it here. Like, obviously, like I can't fake being like excited about a thing. Like Google can't pay me enough to like smile and dance. So when I start bouncing, it is because I'm like legitimately excited. But that is a thing that I've noticed in like the games industry a little bit. And one of my coworkers actually has been heading up, I guess, a Backend Summit on the like GDC track just for this reason. So backend engineers can like all gather together and talk excitedly about like their stuff. So I think it's a lot of fun. Don't hate on like the database engineers. You need them. Like I said, when I first went from just like SQLite 3 because I was tired of like flat file stuff to like Postgres or MySQL, whatever we used in my first game, I had a really hard time making that transition. It's harder than you might think, even if you're like me and used to like building game engines from scratch or something.
But it seems to me like one of the greatest things that you've brought us this afternoon, on top of that incredible Firebase keynote, is that incredible shirt. Danielle mentions in the chat that this is an amazing shirt, and I completely agree. You look like 100% on fleek. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
And from all of us at Pocket Gamer Connect's Digital 5, thank you so much for attending the keynote today. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the show, the rest of this week. We hope you have a great opportunity in Discord to talk to people who have attended your talk.